What if I told you that the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one with the biggest ships or the smartest tech, but the one that refuses to lose, even when the odds are impossible? This is the story of humanity, underestimated, chaotic, and unstoppable. And when aliens came knocking, they didn't find victims, they found the storm. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The stars had always been silent. For thousands of cycles, the Zalari people had traveled the galaxies, mapping worlds, studying cultures, and adding new knowledge to their great archive. They believed they had seen everything the universe had to offer. Civilizations rose, fell, and flickered out like distant suns. Some were curious, some were hostile, but most were predictable. So, when Captain Levin's expedition ship entered, the Soul Drift, an uncharted arm of a quiet spiral galaxy, they expected nothing more than a few barren rocks, and maybe a curious fungus. The signal changed everything. It was faint, bouncing through old satellites and echoing through static. A repeating rhythm, a pattern unmistakably artificial. Language. The crew of the Saurian Vale listened in silence as the garbled message repeated. Fragments of a human emergency broadcast, scrambled, weathered, but undeniably alive. Levin's long fingers tapped the console, thoughtful. This system was marked as void, he said. There shouldn't be anyone here. Toma, the youngest member of the expedition, leaned forward. His eyes were wide with excitement. This could be a lost colony. Unrecorded, primitive, perhaps? Levin nodded slowly. Then we observe, quietly. From orbit, Earth was breathtaking. Clouds spiraled across deep blue oceans. Continents shimmered in the sun, and points of light twinkled like stars on the surface cities, burning through the night. Sela, the ship's AI, scanned the planet with growing curiosity. They're industrial, she reported. Technologically advanced. War-capable, but undisciplined. No unifying world government. Fragmented powers, resource conflicts. Cultural divides, strange. They are both chaotic and progressing rapidly. Levin raised a brow ridge. Unstable. Possibly dangerous. Perhaps we should not approach. But Toma disagreed. Captain, the archive has no record of this species. If they are unknown, they must be studied. It is our duty. The decision was made. A small scout pod, sleek and cloaked, descended through the upper atmosphere, scanning for a landing site far from population centers. They chose a mountain forest, dense with trees and isolated structures. From orbit, it looked like a peaceful place. Quiet, unarmed. It was not. The moment the scout ship touched the ground, the forest erupted. Sensors screamed. Something had locked onto the pod before it even powered down. Camouflage shielding flared. To life too late. Gunfire primitive, but brutal tore through the trees. The Zalari scrambled inside the pod as two of their crew fell, taken out by projectiles moving faster than expected. This was a research mission, shouted Toma, clutching a wounded comrade. Why are they attacking? Sela's voice was sharp. We were detected before landing. They used infrared drones and acoustic tracking. These humans have prepared for visitors. Levin gritted his teeth. They expected us? Or something like us? Sela paused. Not specifically, but their military infrastructure includes protocols for unidentified flying objects, prepared not out of certainty, but out of paranoia, fear. They planned for threats long before meeting any. The pod launched back into the sky, smoke trailing behind it. Human aircraft followed, sleek metal hunters with roaring engines. Levin called for stealth maneuvers, and the pod vanished from their radar, leaving only questions behind on the ground. Back aboard the Saurian Vale, Silence filled the command chamber. Levin stood at the viewport, watching the Earth rotate slowly below. They reacted faster than expected, he said finally. Brutally, added Toma, still shaken. No warning, no hesitation. They didn't wait to see if we came in peace. They didn't need to, Sella answered. They've seen war. Too much of it. It's written into their history. They do not trust. Not anymore. Levin closed. His eyes, the weight of the moment sinking in. Do we try again? Sella's lights dimmed slightly. Captain, we always assumed that a race advanced enough to leave their world would be peaceful, logical, united. But humans are something else. Their minds burn like unstable stars. They fight each other, yet they build wonders. They destroy, yet they dream. And their stories? They imagine monsters, but often become the monsters themselves, just to survive. Toma stepped forward, voice soft. But they're beautiful too, aren't they? That fire, that madness. It's what makes them dangerous, but it's also what makes them different. Levin said nothing for a long time. The crew waited. Outside, the ship, Earth spun on, full of people who had no idea how close they had come to something they couldn't yet understand. Finally, the captain spoke. Keep orbit. We watch, we learn, but we do not touch. He turned, voice low but clear. Because, for the first time in 1,000 years, I am afraid what we might awaken. And somewhere down on the surface, a little girl named Marin looked up at the sky, pointing to a flicker of light that vanished behind the clouds. Papa, she whispered, I think someone's watching us. And someone was not far above. Unseen, the stars held their breath. The wind howled over the ridge as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the dense forest below. It had been 3 weeks since the unidentified craft touched down and vanished. 3 weeks of questions. The government said nothing. The media was told it was a weather balloon. But in the quiet places, the ones without cameras or microphones, soldiers were moving. Drones were watching. And deep in the forest, something was waiting. Reese crouched beneath the low branches of a pine tree, eyes fixed on a flickering motion sensor. He was still as stone, breathing slow, steady. He wore a lightweight combat suit blacked out, armored and nearly invisible in the trees. His helmet showed thermal readings, heartbeats, and digital terrain overlays. Everything pointed to one fact. Someone or something was coming back. Contact, came the whisper in his earpiece. Northwest Ridge. 4 hostiles. Not human. Reese didn't flinch. He tapped a command into his wrist console, signaling his drone to reposition. Above him, a silent quadrotor zipped through the trees, streaming data in real time. What this? Drone saw confirmed everything. Tall, thin figures in dark armor, gliding across the forest floor like ghosts. No footprints. No heat signatures. But they were there. The Zalari had returned. Commander Levin stood at the edge of the clearing, scanning with a sleek handheld device. His team moved silently behind him, their feet barely touching the ground. Their mission was simple: collect soil samples, gather footage, and leave unnoticed. But something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. The wind had stopped. Even then, birds were gone. Toma followed nervously behind, remembering the last mission's failure. He clutched his field recorder tightly, trying not to look like prey. We shouldn't be here this long, he muttered. Levin nodded, but before he could reply, a flash of movement lit up the corner of his visor. Reese moved like a shadow, bursting from behind the trees with calculated precision. His shock baton connected with the rear scout, dropping the alien in silence. The others turned, too slow. A stun grenade rolled across the mossy floor and exploded in a burst of white light. The aliens stumbled, disoriented. By the time Vision cleared. Reese was gone. Toma gasped, dazed but alive. They're hunting us. No, Levin hissed, pulling him behind a fallen log. He's hunting us. Reese darted between trees, barely making a sound. He wasn't following orders anymore. Technically, this wasn't even his mission. But after seeing the footage, after hearing how those creatures nearly got away last time, he had made up his mind. If they came back, someone had to be ready. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. Levin regrouped with his remaining scouts near a rocky incline. They know we're here, he said. Abort the mission. Full extraction. But it was too late. Above them, a human quadcopter buzzed low, casting a red spotlight across the trees. Automated guns locked onto the Zelari suits, forcing them to scatter. Toma screamed as one drone fired a warning shot, narrowly missing his arm. Sala's voice echoed in Levin's earpiece. Hostile forces are triangulating your location. You have 5 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Levin's mind raced. We underestimated them again. Correction, Sela replied calmly. You underestimated the individual. The human operative on the ground is not following a pattern. He's adapting. Reese moved with surgical efficiency. He disabled another Zelari with an EMP net, then took cover as a plasma pulse scorched the bark beside him. One of the aliens had a hand weapon compact and deadly. Reese ducked, rolled, and retaliated with a well-placed concussive round. The blast knocked the alien backward into the dirt. Suddenly, a scream. It wasn't a soldier. It was a child. Reese froze. Somewhere, between the trees, a young girl had wandered into the chaos. Small, maybe 7 years old, bundled in a pink jacket, staring wide-eyed at the glowing suits and crashing drones. Marin, what the hell is a kid doing out here? Reese muttered, already moving toward her. A Zelari scout spotted the girl and raised a weapon. Not out of cruelty, out of reflex. She was between him and escape. But before he could act, Reese tackled him from the side, driving the alien into the dirt. No civilians! Reese roared, shielding the girl with his body. For a moment, everything stopped. Levin and Toma stood frozen. The child cried quietly. The wind had returned. Reese looked up at the 2 aliens, blood smeared on his visor, his armor torn. Get out, he growled. Don't come back. Levin held Toma back from retaliating. There was no winning this. Not now. Not against that dot. They vanished moments later, retreating to their cloaked shuttle deeper in the hills. Reese didn't chase them. He simply sat, holding the girl, waiting for his drone to call in an EVAC. Back aboard the Sarian Vale, Toma was silent. He stared at the wound on his arm, and the look in the human's eyes, like fire, like rage, but also like fear. He wasn't following orders, he said at last. He acted alone, Levin nodded. That's what makes him dangerous. Sala's voice was quiet this time. That's what makes them all dangerous. And down on earth, Marin's father ran through the trees, tears in his eyes, calling her name. Reese stood when he saw the man, nodding once before disappearing into the shadows, leaving no trace except a story the little girl would never forget. The stars above Earth were no longer silent. They pulsed with motion fleets on the move, signals bursting across the void, and weapons warming in cold blackness. For weeks after the failed recon mission, the Zelari High Council debated in hidden chambers. Some wanted to retreat, others demanded retaliation. The humans had made their position clear. Earth was not open for quiet study. It was a fortress hidden in plain sight, and now the Zelari would see just how deep its defenses ran. Commander Nazir stood aboard the bridge of the Vanguard Ascendant, Earth's first fully international warship, built in orbit, painted black. As night, and armed with tech no outsider had yet seen, The ship was a symbol of something new, something frightening. Humanity, united not by peace, but by the threat of something greater. For the first time in history, governments had set aside their squabbles and agreed on one thing. Earth was not going to be taken. Not quietly. Not ever. Across the solar system, warning buoys blinked red. The Zelari fleet had arrived. Nazir leaned over the tactical display, watching alien ships warp in one after another, long, slender, beautiful in design, but heavy with purpose. 27 ships, he said calmly. Heavy class. Not scouts. This is a full incursion. His second in command, a Canadian pilot named Royce, frowned. They think we're still tribal. That will fall apart under pressure. They're about to find out what pressure taught us. Nazi replied. In a hidden diplomatic outpost near Luna, a final attempt at peace was already failing. Elder Thalin of the Zelari Council stood in a glass chamber, speaking in slow, practiced tones. We did not come to destroy your world, he said. We came to understand it. But your people are violent, impulsive, and irrational. We cannot risk leaving you unobserved. Across from him sat Ima, a linguist and former war refugee chosen to speak for Earth. Her eyes didn't flinch. And yet we didn't fire thee. First shot. Your people landed armed, and when they were challenged, they returned with warships. Thalin tilted his head, confused. We sent explorers. One of your kind ambushed them. Ama leaned forward. Because your explorers came. Cloaked, armed, and silent into a nation's territory. You think us irrational, but tell me, Elder, what would your people have done if strangers appeared in your skies and took your children? Dalan was silent. The screen went dark. The first shots of the battle came not from Earth, but from Mars. Human engineers had turned an abandoned terraforming base into a decoy station. When the Zelari approached, it came to life sending out false fleet data, mimicking distress signals and buying time. The trap worked. 2 alien destroyers were disabled by hidden railguns. The rest of the fleet scattered, losing formation. Nazir saw his moment. The vanguard led the charge. What followed wasn't clean. It wasn't elegant. It was human warfare, fast, unpredictable, and full of risk. Human ships didn't fly in neat formations. They weaved between asteroids, skimmed planetary rings, and used debris as cover. Some were drones, some were decoys. Some were piloted by soldiers who had trained not for victory, but for survival. Levin, still aboard the Sarian Veil, watched. From the edge of the battlefield. This isn't a fleet, he whispered. It's chaos. No, Sella answered. It's strategy disguised as chaos. They've learned to weaponize unpredictability. The Zelare fleet tried to adapt, but it was too late. Human AI systems hijacked their communications. EMP bursts scrambled targeting. And then came the final blow, a massive, hidden satellite near Saturn powered up and fired a concentrated energy pulse through the heart of the battlefield. It didn't destroy, it disabled. One by one, the Zelari ships flickered out, powerless. And drifting. Levin's ship was spared. Nazir had issued a direct order. If the commander of that vessel is watching, tell him this is his last chance. The call was sent. And for the first time in the war, the Zelari answered. A ceasefire was declared within the hour. Down on Earth, Ama stood outside the embassy dome on the lunar surface, staring at the pale blue planet in the distance. Her message had reached. Them perhaps not in time to stop the fighting, but enough to stop the end of everything. In orbit, the Vanguard Ascendant hovered silently, wounded but alive. Inside, Nazir sat alone in the war room, eyes fixed on the list of the fallen. Even victory had a price. Levin sent one final message from his ship. We do not understand you. It read, but we will no longer test you. Reese, now stationed on a quiet outpost along Earth's orbital perimeter, watched the skies with a steady gaze. He knew it wasn't over. Not really. Peace was a pause, not a guarantee. But for now, the stars were calm again, and on a grassy hill far below, Marin played under the open sky, unaware that the universe had changed forever because one soldier refused to stand down and because humanity, against all odds, had learned how to stand together. The sky above Earth was calm now, almost too calm. Years had passed since the great standoff, since the stars had lit up with fire and silence. The Zalari fleet had retreated beyond the edge of the system. Earth had strengthened its defenses. And for a long time, no new ships came through the void. The war, if it could be called that, had lasted only a few hours, but its echo changed everything. Humans now looked up at the sky not with wonder, but with a new kind of awareness. They were not alone, and they would never be unprepared again. Dallin adjusted his recording device and cleared his throat. He was young, curious, and far too bold for his own good. At least that's what his mentor had told him. As a Zalari student historian, he had grown up hearing whispers of the human encounter. The story was often avoided by his people, spoken of only in cold terms, the Earth event. But to Dallin, it was more than a moment in the archives. It was a turning point, a puzzle, and a warning. He had come to Earth for answers. Across from him sat a man whose name still stirred caution among the Zalari. Reese, older now, his beard was gray, his armor long stored away. He looked more like a tired veteran than a symbol of defiance. He sat calmly in the garden of a quiet research base, nestled in the green hills of northern Europe. Birds chirped. The air was still. If not for the small transmitter on the table, it would have been easy to forget they were part of something so much larger. "You're not what I expected," Dallin said, tapping his recorder. "Good," Reese replied. "People who expect things about humans usually get surprised." Dallin smiled awkwardly. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Why did you let us go?" Reese leaned back, eyes scanning the clouds overhead. "We didn't let you go. We didn't win like that. We pushed you back. Yeah, but that wasn't the point." Dallin frowned. "Then what was?" There was a long pause. Reese looked at him then, really looked. "We made a decision, not to destroy you, not to chase you across the stars. We could have tried. There were plenty of voices screaming for it after what happened in the forest, but we didn't." "Why?" "Because of her." Dallin blinked. "Her?" Reese reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn photo. It showed a little girl in a pink jacket, smiling with missing front teeth and wild curls. "Her name's Marin. She was just a kid when your scouts landed, got caught in the middle of it all. I pulled her out, shielded her from fire. I was supposed to be following orders. I wasn't. But that day, I realized something." Dallin leaned forward. "What did you realize?" "That we don't fight for power or glory or even safety," Reese said. "Not really. We fight to protect. It's messy, it's emotional, it's imperfect, but it's human. When we faced your fleet, we could have ended it with violence. We had the chance. Instead, we sent a message. Not to show strength, but to show restraint." Dallin sat quietly, the weight of the words sinking in. For years, his people had believed the humans were dangerous because of their unpredictability, their emotions, their refusal to follow logic. But now, he saw something else. A species that knew how to win, but chose not to destroy. A species that was deadly not because it wanted to be, but because it had to be. Reese stood and stretched. "You're not the first to ask that question, and you won't be the last. But remember, this humans learn fast. Not always the right things, but we learn. We fight, we fall, we stand up again. That's our curse. And our gift. Dallin looked around the garden, the sky, the open world. You could have been conquerors, Reese chuckled. We were. A long time ago. But somewhere along the way, we learned something harder than how to win. What's that? When not to. Far above them, a station blinked quietly in orbit, scanning the skies, still watching. The stars remained silent. No new fleets had come, no threats, but the defenses hadn't lowered. Earth was still ready not for war, but for the unexpected. Marin, now a teenager, walked through the garden with a book in hand. She waved at Reese and smiled at Dallin politely. Dallin nodded back, surprised at how normal she seemed. Just a girl, untouched by the scale of what had once almost happened. Yet somehow, it was her presence, quiet, gentle, that had changed the course of everything. Reese watched her go. The last rule, he said, almost to himself, is knowing what you're really fighting for. Dallin ended the recording. He didn't know what the rest of the Zelari would do with this interview. Some might still fear the humans. Others might admire them. But he knew one thing for certain. Earth was not the same world they once thought it was. And humanity was not the species they had assumed. They were something far more dangerous and far more worthy. Because when the moment came, they had chosen not to burn the galaxy. They chose to protect it.